So how important is shock absorption on a treadmill really? Is it all that it's cracked up to be? Or have we made the hunt for good shock absorption way more important than it actually is? So over the years, we have seen many treadmill advertisements promote good shock absorption and say things around the lines of, oh, this treadmill is good because it has this type of running platform, or this treadmill is good because it reduces shock by 30%. So why is reducing shock so good? And is it good for you? Is it a natural way of running on a machine that has a padded surface? Let's do some research and try to find out the technicalities behind why shock absorption may or may not be good for you. So from the looks of it, there have been numerous studies showing how shock absorption can preserve the joints of athletes and even plantar tissue. And plantar tissue is basically the tissue underneath your foot, the kind of the curvature of it, and it connects your heel to your toes. So here are two examples of the two studies, one published in May of 2012 and March of 2019. 16 experienced heel-toe runners participated in the study. Plantar loads data were collected using a novel PDAR insole sensor system during running on the treadmill, concrete, and grass surfaces at 3.8 meters per second running speed and then analyzed. 2019 study. Plantar force data and metabolic data were collected for 20 men during running at 8 kilometers per hour and 10 kilometers per hour on the treadmill with and without cushion. Two-way ANOVAs with repeated measures were performed to determine the treadmill effects and the speed effects. The results of the first study are as follows. Compared with running on the two other surfaces, treadmill running showed a lower magnitude of maximum plantar pressure and maximum plantar force for the total foot. It goes on to say in their conclusions, treadmill running may be useful in early rehabilitation programs. Patients with injuries in the lower extremities may benefit from the reduction in plantar loads. Now, I think it's important to mention that in this study, they don't really state whether the treadmills they used had shock absorption or cushion in them, but it's still worth looking into because the second study tested on treadmills with cushion or shock absorption, and both these studies had similar results. So here's the results of the second study. Participants significantly decreased peak plantar force on the forefoot at both 10 kilometers per hour and 8 kilometers per hour, and peak plantar force on the midfoot only at 10 kilometers per hour while running on the treadmill with cushion compared to the treadmill without cushion. Their significance section states, running on the treadmill with cushion significantly decreased plantar force on the forefoot and midfoot and increased metabolic energy consumption. Running on the treadmill with cushion may be a useful method in the prevention of forefoot injuries and increasing exercise effects. So we see that treadmills with shock absorption are useful for preventing plantar fasciitis. I think I'm pronouncing that right. But plantar fasciitis is just basically when the plantar tissue is inflamed, has inflammation, and it causes pain in the heel. So it's useful for preventing that, but is it useful for preventing joint issues? There was a journal published in 2017 by the Korean Journal of Sport Biomechanics. They studied the differences in impact variables between treadmills with and treadmills without a shock-absorbing function, to propose the development of a treadmill with improved or added shock-absorbing function to reduce impact shock. So in other words, what they're basically saying is that they tested on treadmills with shock absorption and on treadmills without shock absorption to see which one had the lesser impact to the body, specifically the ankle region and the neck region. So here's what they found. The peak positive ankle acceleration Yeah, if you want to read all that, you can pause the video, but I'm not going to read all that. I'll just fast forward to their conclusions. Here's their conclusions. Our results indicate that the shock absorbing function of a treadmill plays a role in reducing impact shock. Therefore, in future treadmill development, shock absorbing function should be improved or incorporated to reduce impact shock to the body. So this all sounds nice, and from the looks of it, the ads and commercials seem pretty legit. But there is one thing that they're not telling you. Let's take a look again at the results of our 2019 study and look at the last sentence. Participants significantly increased metabolic energy consumption while running on the treadmill with cushion, compared to the treadmill without cushion. Now let's look at their significance section. On the website, there's a significance section, and this is what it states. Running on the treadmill with cushion significantly decreased plantar force on the forefoot and midfoot and increased metabolic energy consumption. Pretty interesting. Here's the conclusions of an article published in 2020. The considerably higher shock absorption of the treadmill than the tartan surface, that's just a track surface that athletes use, leads to a reduction in the amount of energy returned to the athlete, which in turn increases physiological stress. What about another one? This was also published in 2020. Some studies have found that the metabolic cost of running increased as the treadmill surface became more compliant. What that simply means is just less stiff, or there was more shock absorption. Sassy previously reported that an increase in shock absorption of the surface in question is the main mechanical property responsible for a reduction in elastic energy recovery and in overall muscle tendon efficiency, thereby resulting in greater muscle work and higher energy demands. Wow, that's really interesting. It goes on to say that these authors estimated that an increase in shock absorption of approximately 35% will result in an increase in the cost of running of 5%. So from the sounds of these articles, it seems that running on a treadmill with more shock absorption is actually harder and more energy costing to the individual. Your running is actually less efficient. Here's yet another quote from one of the articles published in 2020. In a systematic review, Miller found that endurance running performance is generally poorer on a motorized treadmill compared to overground, which could partly be related to differences in surface stiffness. So with all that being said, good shock absorption on a treadmill will do well at preserving your lower body parts, but they come at the cost of poor performance and more energy consumption, which in turn means just a harder run. And some people might like that, some people might not. Depends on whatever your preference is. But at that point, if you're looking for a treadmill with the best shock absorption, might as well consider a no-impact cardio like an elliptical or an exercise bike, where there's literally little to no impact. So you might be thinking to yourself, well, there's tons of machines and I don't know what's best for me. Well, lay that burden on us. We have a warehouse based in Illinois, Morton Grove, and you can come visit us, check out all of our equipment on the spot, and we'd be glad to help you find a machine for your specific situation. Whether it be you have an injury or a specific fitness goal, we'd be glad to help. And I'll put our address in the description below and our phone number and email. Hit up our sales rep, he'd be glad to talk to you, see what works out for you. And at the same time, you can also visit our website, fitnesswarehousedeals.com. We have all of our machines on our website that are currently in warehouse, and you can check out the different features in the descriptions. And whatever appeals to your fancy, give us a call, we'll set it up. Now, we're not done here discussing whether or not shock absorption on a treadmill is good for you. The question that's now in question is, does that make sense? Is walking or running on a padded surface natural for your body? Is it a natural way of running? Is it a natural way of walking? Now, I'm not talking in terms of someone with pre-existing injuries that could really use a padded surface for rehabilitation purposes. I'm talking in terms of someone that is healthy. Now, I tried to do some research on whether or not it's true or whether or not it's false, whether or not it's natural to walk on such surfaces. and I couldn't really find anything. But what I can say is that if we think about this logically, we can honestly say, no, it's not really natural. And here's why. Think about it like this. If we take a look at what we walk or run on a daily basis, we can easily see that our bodies adapt to our surroundings. For instance, here are some surfaces that we come into contact with every day: gravel, cement, wood floors, dirt, grass, etc. For the most part, most of these are hard surfaces that our muscles and joints have had to get used to. Our bodies find it natural to walk on these things, and even as a kid, these are the types of planes we would run and play on. But when you're on a treadmill, that particular surface is not a natural way to run or walk on. Picture running on the ground, but the ground has springs or shocks in them. Would you say that is a natural way of running? Of course not. Or let's say the ground you walk on is now a giant mattress, and everywhere you walk is cushioned to take the pressure off of your knees and other parts of your body. Would you say that's natural? Obviously not. So logically thinking about this shows us that running on a deck with shocks in them isn't the most effective way at causing our bodies to adapt to our surroundings. And there are multiple websites out there that talk about how running outdoors utilizes more muscles in your body and there's more muscle activation. And obviously that's due to there being different types of terrain, different weather conditions, and also temperature changes. So, it might be easier to run in the cold versus the warm weather. Now, this is not to say that running on a treadmill is bad and should be avoided. No, there are many professional athletes that utilize treadmills to dial in on their performance and be better. So running on a treadmill is actually great for, rehabilitation purposes, for dialing in on your performance, even though I know earlier I said, there's poor performance on a treadmill. But if you're trying to dial in on something, treadmills can be handy. There's different settings on a treadmill, like incline, speed. There's also a controlled environment. So if you want to rate certain stats and pinpoint, they can be good for those type of things. And I've seen a lot of athletes where they're running on a treadmill, they're hooked up with these, would look like diodes, if that's even the proper word, but these attachments to monitor certain things in their body that's happening. So they can really dial in on training on a treadmill. Now, obviously, the average day person isn't a professional athlete that needs that dial in type training. People just go to the gym and run on the treadmill and whatever it, right? Or maybe they don't whatever it, but you get what I'm saying. You're the average day person, most likely watching this video, and you just go to the gym and run on the treadmill, But anyway, like I said, this isn't to say that running on a treadmill is bad. They're good as supplemental training. If it's raining or storming outside, well, everyone's gonna go to the gym and to the treadmill. But I mentioned these things about whether or not it's natural because I think we've been too convinced that good shock absorption is a necessity when it comes to buying a treadmill. People are just too focused on it, and they're not focused enough on our body's natural way of absorbing impact. If we just take some time to focus on our running technique, we would quickly figure out that our body has its own natural shock absorption system. And a lot of people get injured because of poor running form. So if you just perfect your running form, you'd prevent a lot of injuries on its own long term and not have to need so much padded surfaces just to hold you tight. So I'm gonna do you guys a favor. Here's a tutorial on how to run properly. That way you can keep your body healthy long term.
So before I show you what proper form is, I want to show you what bad form is so you can see where most people make their mistakes. Now obviously that was over exaggerated, but I wanted to show you guys that because it goes over a lot of the main mistakes people make when running. So let's talk about it. What are the main mistakes that people make when they run?
So I want to stop it here. Sorry that it's a little blurry. I am stopping the footage while I'm in motion. But there's a couple issues that we can clearly see. So if you look at the upper torso, the shoulders are clearly tense. They're not relaxed, they're not down, they're up, they're shrugged. And then they're also back, you know, the chest is too puffed out. And the upper torso is also pivoted. It's leaning too far forward. It's not aligned with the rest of my body. It's not straight. You know, the hips are being pivoted. And that obviously is a bad thing. You know, we want our posture to be straight while we're running. We can have a little bit of lean, but it will align to our legs, you know, as we're running. And I could explain that further later. But too much pivoting going on here. And then if you look towards the bottom at the legs, my calves and my legs are overstriding. You know, there's too much leg going forward. My calves and my feet are further than my knees. You know, where we want to land is kind of under the knee. And so when I land on this, it's gonna put too much pressure on my joints because I'm overstriding. You know, it's not a balanced stride. It's not a little bit of a shorter stride to where my feet will land under the knee, like I said. Now I'm gonna show you guys some other poor forms, and they're a little bit more subtle. I'm trying to copy that of a normal average day runner with poor form. And like I said, this is over exaggerated, but let me show you the poor forms in normal average day-to-day life, so that way you can get more of a visual. So here's the first poor form I'd like to establish. I'd like to call this the overstrider. You can see my legs are way too far ahead of me. They're too far out. I'm reaching, and you can see that my calves and my feet are way above the knee, way too forward. And if we fast forward a little bit, boom, you can clearly see that my legs are stiff. There is no bend in that knee whatsoever, and I am reaching really far out, like I said. So this is bad because if you land that way, you're gonna land from a stiff leg, and all the shock is gonna travel up your bones, into your joints, and through your muscles. And that's what ultimately causes those joint issues, those knee issues. You're not properly absorbing the shock. In fact, it's not even being absorbed at all because there's no bend. This one I like to call the donut chaser because you can clearly see my torso is leaned way too far forward. It's not even straight, or at least slightly leaned. You know, for the most part, it's like I'm chasing a donut. You know, there's a donut in front of me, I really want it, so I'm really jutting myself forward. And that is ultimately bad. You know, it can restrict your breathing, and it can also ruin posture over time. So this one's kind of more understandable. I call this the lazy runner. You know, after a long, hard run, we kind of get lazy. Our steps aren't intentional. We're not really springing. We're letting our feet just land and land hard, and our shoulders are flailing. You know, we're being lazy about it. And obviously, you know, like I said, it's understandable to do this, but we still want to run with intention, so for the sake of long-term preventing injury, right? We want to absorb every impact. We don't want to let our feet stomp real hard on the ground or just fall to the ground. You know, we want to make sure we're absorbing those impacts. We want to make sure our posture isn't getting lazy, so that way our posture is healthy. So this one is called the wind puncher. You can see that my arms are not at my sides pumping in front of me, but instead they're pumping at across me, across my torso. You know, I'm as if punching the wind. And this is twisting my torso, twisting my hips, and that is clearly not an efficient way of running. It'll cause me to maybe even zigzag a little bit. So definitely want to avoid wind punching while you're running. This one is called the tense runner. My shoulders, instead of them being relaxed and down and back, they are up and hunched. And this is bad because it can restrict your breathing while you're running. It can make the run a lot more harder. And obviously that affects down the chain, you know, and that, you know, with restricted breathing, you might not run as much. You might not run as fast. You might not run as with intention because you're tiring yourself out.
Now that we've gone over bad form, let's go over what good form is. So what should our posture be like when we start to begin a run and when we are running?
So let's start with our upper body. We don't want our neck and our head too far forward and too far back. We don't want to be hunched forward as we're running with our neck hunched forward. We want to maintain a straight posture. Our shoulders open, not hunched forward, not hunched back, and not hunched up like we're tense. We want to relax. Keep that posture straight, keep our chest open, and maintain this sort of posture. Now let's move on to our lower body. So we don't want any pivoting going on. We don't want our butt sticking out and pivoting at our hips. We don't want our torso leaning too far forward as we're running. We want to maintain a more or less straight posture, and we want our hips and our butt to be in. So now here's my overall form. I'm completely straight. You can see that there's no pivoting, and I'm gonna make sure that there's a slight bend in my knees so I can absorb the impact. I'm not running stiff-legged. And what I'm gonna do now is lean forward in a fall-like position and then accelerate. Now, when I do that, it helps me to maintain a straight plank-like position as I'm running. Think about doing a plank, but you're standing straight up and you're running in that sort of plank position. So that's what I was talking about, having a slight tilt as you run, but overall your posture is straight when you're even doing that. So here's me running with proper form. You can clearly tell I'm not overstriding. My legs aren't too far ahead of me. My knees are bent, so that way when I land, I'm absorbing the impact, and my feet will then be directly under the knee. That's where we want it when we land. We want our feet to be directly under our knees when they hit the ground. Not too far out, not too far back. And also, when I touch the ground, you can tell I'm not slamming my feet against the ground to try to generate force to push forward. I'm not being lazy and letting them just sloop to the ground, letting the gravity just carry them down, and I'm using the elasticity in my calves and in my hamstrings. So as soon as I land, I'm in a sort of hop position, I'm trying to hop. So we don't want our feet to slam against the ground. We don't want to be lazy and let them just hit the ground. We want every step to be intentional. You could also tell that I'm leaning slightly forward, and this is what I was talking about earlier. It's okay to lean forward if you're in a plank-like position, maintaining straight posture. My hips aren't pivoted, my torso isn't pivoted. Overall, my posture is straight, and that's what you want to maintain while you're in your run. And my shoulders are relaxed, I'm looking forward ahead of me, my neck isn't too far strained out, and my arms are also pumping straight forward. They're not pumping across my torso. So that's how you run properly. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video and found the information given here very helpful when it comes to purchasing a treadmill and what you should be focusing on. Don't let advertisements and commercials tell you what you need and what you want and overemphasize something that's not really as important than what they make it out to be. Like I said, we run and walk outside all the time. Our bodies have already gotten used to those types of surfaces and terrains. We don't need to be hyper focused on whether or not the surface we're running on a daily basis is cushioned. It's kind of like saying, oh, am I gonna run on my bed every day? I mean, bed is like overshooting it, treadmill's not a bed, but just the cushion factor of it, that's something to really be thinking about. And if you like the video, please leave us a like, subscribe to our channel. We have tons more content to help you with overall fitness equipment. And by all means, leave us a comment down below on how you felt about the video and the information provided here. Did you have any cool articles or journals that were written about this subject that would apply, or is conflicting with what we brought here to you guys today? We'd love to read on that stuff and grow, and that's what it's all about, just helping each other grow together, even in the fitness community. We push each other. So thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys on the next one.